Bem-vindos to one more episode of the Type Theory Forall podcast. As always, this is your host, PW, and I am very, very excited to introduce today's guest for a couple of reasons. First, Valeria de Paiva is a Brazilian that went to do her PhD at Cambridge in the mid-80s. Today, in the 2020s, I already think it's hard to immigrate from Brazil. I imagine how it was in that time and for a woman. Seriously, I'm not exaggerating in saying that I consider her one of my heroes for it. The second reason that I'm pretty excited is that Valeria comes from the math background into type theory, and she has worked a lot with category theory. So this is probably the most technical episode we get about category theory so far. That's also pretty exciting. The third reason is that she's the founder of the meeting Women in Logic, and we have the opportunity to talk very seriously about making our field more gender equal with someone who cares very deeply about this topic and has been working on it for several years now. Now, before we get into this episode, I would like to give a huge shout out to all our new patrons that answered our call of support in the last episode and now allows this show to be economically viable. There are a few dollars left for us to hit our $300 mark, but huge thank you. One of the perks is that to becoming a patron is that you get your name to show in the episode, like here now. And also huge thanks for the old supporters that has always believed in the spirit of the show. If you want to become a member of this exclusive community, please visit typetheoryforall.com/Patreon. You can get access to exclusive channels in our Discord, submit questions to our upcoming guests, and even get one-on-one meetings with me. Exclusively for our patrons, we also have an entirely different podcast, Type Theory Exists, where we have behind-the-scene episodes, and I talk about my plans, my travels, and even my participation in conferences, where I bring curated content to give insight on what's happening in our field across the world. Now, if you cannot become a patron, I totally understand, but we also accept one-off tips in our Ko-Fi. Any amount is always greatly appreciated, and it greatly assists to make this show to keep running. So now, without further ado, let's get into this episode. Welcome everyone to one more episode of the Type Theory Forall podcast. As always, this is your host, PW, and it's my great pleasure to be here with our co-host, Dan Plukin. How you doing, my man?
Hello, I'm also glad to be here.
That was very... Come on, you can do better, dude. Come on.
What else am I supposed to say? What was the question?
How are you, man? Show enthusiasm. We're so happy to be here. I'm kidding.
Well, actually, okay, I'm a little bit quiet because I'm intimidated by how friendly Valeria has been before we started. Just the level of conversation between the two of you is not something I'm prepared for as like a Slavic kind of guy. So I'll be like a little bit quiet. But yeah, I'm really glad to be here.
So that's one thing that I think is very humbling in our field and doing this kind of work is, we meet these amazing people. And I must say, and this is me, doing a little bit of a confession to Valeria, because honestly, Valeria, you're one of my heroes. You're a woman in computer science and mathematics from Brazil, and I coming out and immigrating from Brazil to do my PhD. I know how hard it is, and you have already done this in the 80s. I have no idea. It was a great pleasure to study a little bit of your story, and I'm very curious and interested to hear about your experiences. So, one thing that I usually start my conversations with my guests is listening about the stories, and how did you end up going to Cambridge to do your PhD in the 80s?
Well, first of all, many thanks, both of you, but especially you, Pedro, for inviting me to this. This is such a great thing to do. I'm really very flattered by the invitation, and I'm very happy to be here. As I said, you have to be careful because I like to talk. So, sometimes you have to kind of bring me back to the main reasons why we're talking. But yeah, I have lots of stories about me going to Cambridge and doing my PhD there. I think I mean, some of them are very funny, some not so funny. Like, for instance, I intended to go to France, but the French guys were a bit slow on processing applications. So I only received my my acceptance from Paris when I was already in Cambridge. So, they were slow on the mark. But that meant that my life when I first arrived in Cambridge was very, very hard because, of course, I could read English. But, I had not been preparing to go to the place, so I couldn't speak almost,
So your French was better than English then?
oh, much better.
Oh, wow. Wow.
It was hard. The other thing that was very funny that you ask, why going from mathematics to computer science? Actually, in Brazil still, I was moving in this direction. So my master's was in pure algebra, but all my electives were in the computer science department. And being a very poor person at that stage, I didn't know how to, I couldn't afford not to have a scholarship. So I actually applied both to a PhD in Brazil, in Rio, at PUC, and abroad, because, that getting a grant to go abroad is so difficult, right? So, and I couldn't afford 6 months because of, probably don't know about that, but the academic year in Brazil starts in all the southern hemisphere in March or end of February, whereas the academic year in England starts in September or October. So, I had to survive this month. So I kind of started my PhD at PUC with Paulo Veloso. And then when I got the job, the grant, I kind of, I did explain to him beforehand that, that if you could put up with me for 6 months, if I got the grant, would be great, because otherwise I would be in trouble. And if he, didn't feel offended by that, and he didn't, he was very good about it. So that's what I did. And the other thing that's very funny about my going to Cambridge was that I actually decided to go to England because I was very worried about qualifying exams. I'm not very good at doing exams. So I did not want to go to the US and do all the qualifying things. So I said, well, okay, I'm going to go to England. They don't have that. And I hadn't read the prospectus that they sent me properly. And I end up in the worst possible place for that because, there are certified geniuses like Hardy, the mathematician, who kind of wrote about how difficult part 3 of the mathematical triples is. So I end up kind of having to do 6 exams in a completely different way from the way we are used in Brazil, which, or in the US, it's the same way, kind of go doing 2 months and have a test, and 2 months you do that. In England, it's very different. You do a test after a whole year, and it's all or nothing. Either you get it or you don't. So, and as I was explaining, I had all this problem with the language too. So, boy, that after that, the PhD was easier, right? Because the part 3 of the mathematical triples was for me the hardest. And I really, I think I only survived because my supervisor then, Martin Highland, was wonderful, was the best person ever, and kind of gave me an awful lot of support. But, just so that, I had in my part 3 Tim Gowers, who ended up kind of getting the Fields Medal and stuff like that. So it was really hard.
So is it because you have test anxiety like a lot of people do, or?
I do. Yes, I
Yeah.
do too.
I do. I think, I think it's such a silly thing to put you through this extra thing about timing and stuff, right? You don't kind of as much.
Here in Brazil, we usually don't time our exams. So when I was doing my undergrad, they usually give you twice as much time as you need. So you have a lot of time to sit down, think. You don't need to memorize as much as abroad. Very different.
Right. Very different. The other thing about this course in Cambridge is that actually the material that people are teaching tends to be very frontier of mathematics. So kind of 2 years after I suffered through a course on differential geometry, someone finished a PhD thesis that had some of the questions that I had to try to answer. So, yeah. And, I mean, I think the other thing is that in Britain, in England, the whole of the UK, so the exams in England are kind of timed and one after the whole year. And the other thing is that people can't push people that hard because everyone starts thinking about stuff at the age of 10, so kind of they have much more preparation than we have. In Brazil and in the UK, in the US, people have to have a broader, so you have to do biology and French and whatever. But in the UK, people kind of who know that they want to do mathematics, they go for it from the beginning.
How did you get in touch with your advisor? How did you get there?
That's another wonderful story. I actually wanted to go to Oxford, and I wrote to.
Oh no! You ended up in Cambridge.
No, I wanted to go to Oxford, and the Robin Gandy was still active then, so I wrote to him, and I did not know that he was the only student of Alan Turing, and I knew that he was a mathematical logician in Cambridge, so in Oxford. So I wrote to him, and I had a real letter back, a proper letter saying, "I'm afraid I'm about to retire. I only have another 2 years here, so I can't start a new PhD student. But why don't you go to Cambridge and work with my ex-student Martin Hyland?" And that's what I did. So I still have somewhere the letter, handwritten, of course, by Robin Gandy.
That's beautiful. Should put in a.
I need to find that. Yeah.
And at the time you were in pure math, like you hadn't done any kind of computer science.
I had started, as I was saying, doing electives in computer science because I wanted. I mean, the PhD that I started there was in computer science, so I started doing things like abstract data types using category theory and stuff like that, which was very helpful because one of the courses in this horrible Part 3 could be transformed into an essay. So I kind of used some of the things that I had done as an elective in the masters for that.
And then how did you end up going to Xerox PARC after that?
Oh, I mean, before that, I went to some other place, which I think you should know about, because I went from I finished the PhD in the maths department, and I had been going to some of the talks and stuff in the computer lab. And when I and then my husband sometimes jokes that I had 14 years in England with a year of back in Brazil for good behavior. So kind of I finished my PhD, I went back to Brazil like I wanted to do, and kind of taught in PUC for 2 semesters. And by then I wanted to go back because I was already going out with this person who is my husband, Dick Crouch. And he said, "Oh, give me 3 months. Come back for 3 months, and after that I'll finish my PhD and we can go back to Brazil." And he actually even applied for a job in Brazil and got it and stuff. So, but of course he didn't finish in 3 months. It took 3 years. But by then we already had a little daughter and stuff like that. So I I wrote to the friends in the computer lab and said, "Look, I need a job for 3 months. Can you get me one?" And Mike Gordon, who was a wonderful person, said, "Oh yeah, Valeria, come back. I'll get you a short-term job as a research assistant." So that's how I started in the computer lab in the automated deduction group. Actually, it was the Hall group to begin with, the higher order logic group, and then it became the ARG, the automated reasoning group, and then from that I kind of because, as I was saying, I like to talk and I like to learn new things. I kind of kept talking to people in the lab, and then when my 3 months was up and it was clear that we needed more time, I kind of had a job in the NLP side of the lab. The lab the computer lab in Cambridge at that stage was very funny because people have coffee every day at 9:30, something like that, and in the afternoon, and you could sit with different groups. I mean, because people tend to glue together to their own friends, right? So, but me being me, I would stop and talk to different people, and hence I kind of got a job for a year in the NLP group, and it was one of the best postdoc jobs. Because my friend Anne Copstake, that ended up being the head of computer lab recently, she said, "Valeria, why don't you join us?" And so I did. It was the best for me because I have a book with them, which was 1 year job, and I have a book with CUP that people still talk about. So it was good. So then I was already in computer science properly. I kind of moved around. I kind of went from automated deduction to NLP, from NLP to programming language semantics, and then back to automated reasoning. I kind of wrote a project. I mean, because in Cambridge at that stage, you could write projects to keep yourself going, so long as you had a principal researcher who would sign it up for you. So I then kind of wrote first, Angie Pitts gave me a job, which was very nice. And then after that, I wrote a project to work with Larry Paulson and Professor Needham, who was one of the founders of the lab. And on something that I was very excited about, logics for authentication. And it's kind of funny because I think in some ways, and then I had my, when the project was approved and I was about started, I got my serious job in Birmingham, and then Larry Paulson had to change the project. But Larry's very kind, so he still has in his webpage this business about logics for authentication, and say, "Oh, thanks, Valeria, for writing this proposal." And he had to change it completely because he did not want to do proof theory, logics and stuff, but he wanted to do authentication and protocols. So he kind of sometimes is very nice and says to me that, I kind of gave him the push to go into the direction of something that became so important for him eventually. So. Yeah. And then you ask about Xerox, and then then I was very well established in Birmingham. Kind of, I think Birmingham, unlike Cambridge, Cambridge is a very established place, so everyone knows how to do things, and you do things the way they should be done. But Birmingham was kind of trying to become a research university at that stage. Nowadays, it's one of the best places in the UK, right? But at that stage was just kind of starting. So Achim Jung and Aaron Sloman were the two professors trying to make it into a research university. And so when they hired me, they gave me free rein to do things, to invent stuff. So I invented something that I had invented in Cambridge already, which was some sort of seminar that I was saying. I kind of called it the oven, but because it was for half-baked ideas, so that you're supposed to talk to people about things that that you're thinking about, to get information from friends and stuff. So, and I mean, some people still. I mean, Martin Hyland says that sometimes people still kind of ask him how. I mean, the other thing I did that made it sensible to be called oven was that I would bring cake, because you have to kind of you have to bribe other students to come and talk to you about stuff. So I used to give people coffee and cake, in Cambridge, I had a very good espresso machine of my own, and we kind of run it, kind of coffee cakes and cakes for. Yeah, so kind of Birmingham was a great place. I had a wonderful time there. We kind of started more interesting projects as well. Like, we were at Cambridge was part of CLICS, Categorical Logic in Computer Science, which was one of these programs from the European Union that you can renew. So we kind of invented another one after that unfortunately I now cannot remember, but I'm young knows, and if I go back to my scholar, I will find it. It's there somewhere. There was 5 years or 3 years. I mean, normally they were 3 years, and then you renew it for 3 years. So we had one of those. So, kind of, it is a fun thing to come to a place that's not very, I mean, it's great to be in a place that's very established, because, you can apply for, I mean, they give you some money to do stuff and you have possibilities of doing things. But it's also great to be in a place that's just trying to change itself, because organizations, when you kind of come to an organization, you tend to think that they've always been like that and they will always be like that. But they actually are just like people. They grow up and sometimes flourish, and sometimes they just die. And it's kind of
Do you think that when you're in such established organizations such as Cambridge, it can be kind of like harder to get things approved or done? Or is it easier because it has more money?
That's exactly what I'm saying. Kind of, the two sides exist, right? In some ways it's easier because there are some established channels, like scholarships for students and kind of stuff like that. But on the other hand, it's very hard to kind of say to people, we should do things differently. The world's changing under our feet. Like, podcasts are nowadays much more important in some ways than kind of talks, seminars, because they stay. So all this kind of stuff, there's always this the two sides of the coin are important. But of course, the important thing is not to let people shut you off and not do your stuff, right? You have to carry on trying both ways. Is that enough of a history for you, or do you want more?
No, I'm still waiting for us to get to Xerox PARC. Or Xerox come in?
Oh, I haven't got to Xerox yet. Okay,
No,
but then what happened was that the husband wanted to come to the US because he wanted to work for Xerox. And I said, I was always very optimistic. So I thought, okay, I have now a tenured job in Birmingham. It will be easier to find a tenured job in the US. Except that there's a huge difference in culture between Europe and the US. Things in the US tend to be much more short-term. You can't afford, I mean, people in Europe used to think in terms of 10 years, 20 years or something like that. People in the US think in terms of 3 months, and everyone keeps checking how their stocks are doing, right? So when I got here, it was very hard to find a job doing exactly what I was doing, which was theoretical computer science, type theory, and stuff like that. And so I tried. I did not manage to succeed, so I kind of moved into NLP and applied for a job in Xerox PARC, who were doing an awful lot of that then. And I stayed for 10 years, kind of doing AI more than theoretical computer science or type theory. And it was great. Kind of learned lots.
Well, I was just going to say, like, what did AI look like? This was in the 90s at the time, and specifically at Xerox
That's
PARC,
right.
so.
No, it's the beginning of the 2000s, actually, because I finished the PhD in 88, kind of had the diploma only in 1990 because I had gone to Brazil for my time off. Then stayed in Cambridge until 1995, and in Birmingham from 96 to 98. when I kind of finally got the visa sorted out here was 2000, just in time for one of the first bubble bursts in Silicon Valley. So the 2001 was kind of quite interesting, as it were. Kind of, it was bad. It was.
Yeah, was it just a matter of months? You moved in, and then the bubble burst, and then it, all of Silicon Valley must have been on fire.
Kind of.
So she brought it.
Like that. I mean, in October. I hate you, Pedro. No, I started working in Xerox in 1999, but while waiting for the visa. So I got my visa in 1999, end of 99, November or something like that. And then 2001, the bubble burst. So kind of, more than 1 year, but not more than 2 years.
Did you kind of look at your husband like, why did you bring us out here? Like...
Oh, several times, yes. Poor thing.
How would you compare being in academia and then going into kind of in the industry, but more like these research facilities? How does it compare?
Yeah, no, it's industrial research, as they call it. Yeah, kind of. Industrial research, when there were labs doing proper industrial research, was wonderful. The things kind of been going down ever since, right? Kind of the 20% the time that people had in Google to begin with to do your own shtick kind of was extremely interesting.
You can swear on this podcast, by the way.
Oh, thank you. That's wonderful. Good to know. So, when I joined Xerox, I mean, it was, again, another very funny story, because it was actually my husband's boss who said, we need Ron Kaplan, great guy, who said, PARC needs a logician in residence. I mean, PARC had anthropologists in residence, all sociologists in residence, all sorts of people. So he said, we need a logician in residence. But PARC was divided in 4 labs at that stage, 2 software labs and 2 hardware labs, and into different levels of the building. The building has 3 levels. And I mean, the hardware was always on the first level because of the labs and stuff. The second level was more software, and the third level was kind of administration in general. And so he kind of said, this business, we need a logician in residence. And I actually interviewed for, I think, 3 days, 2.5 days, kind of, because I had to talk to all the labs, all the people in different places and stuff. And was kind of, again, it was very fun. I actually learned lots of stuff that actually I'm still working on some of the ideas that I had from people at that stage. You see, that many, and that we're talking about 1999, so kind of more than 20 years. It was PARC. It was, to the end, I think, a very exciting place to be in. But it kind of moved from being completely about thinking for yourself to kind of actually thinking for projects that would get money as soon as possible. Particularly once, because I don't know how much you know about this story, but PARC disentangled itself from Xerox in 2004 to be an independent company, and then went back to being part of Xerox. Don't know exactly when, but it was after I had left, and I left in 2008. So 1999 to 2008, that's what I said, more or less 9 years kind of in PARC. And then much more recently, and then PARC kind of went back to being part of Xerox, but much more having to fend for itself and find projects that would pay for the running of the labs. And much more recently, I mean, I was completely out of it by then, but they they actually were donated for $1 to XRI. And then they left. They had another 4 or 5 or 6. I don't know. That's not me. As part of XRI, SRI, and then they closed completely. So now it doesn't exist anymore. Not even as part of SRI. But industrial research should be 20 years ago.
But you said you were a logician in residence at PARC?
What does it mean to be a resident?
Yeah, especially because you were also NLP adjacent, right? I didn't know that there was any relation between those two.
Well, very good, but there is a huge relation between the two, because in good old-fashioned AI, as they call it, GoFi, there is, people did use an awful lot of logic to do artificial intelligence, and so when I started, I was supposed to be a logician for all different sorts of labs. So in particular for the NLTT, which is the natural language technology and theory and technology, and the CSL, computer science logic labs, 2 different hardware labs, software labs, sorry. But eventually, this idea of a logician in residence didn't work, because Johan de Cler, who was the director of the only lab that had both software and hardware. Boy, I can't remember now the name of the lab, because they keep changing the acronyms. But so he said, no, this is not going to work. We need things that work for the bureaucracy. So no, she's going to work in my lab. You guys might ask her for certain things, but she's going to be in my lab. And that's what I did to begin with. But then in one of the reformulations, I moved to the NLTT, the natural language. And in this lab, ISL isn't intelligence, machine intelligence, something like that. Again, I can look at my CV to remember what's the name of the lab. But it had robotics and which was more hardware. We did robots that were biologically inspired. It had an awful lot of social anthropology. So I worked in a project called Eureka that did NLP for technicians of Xerox. So technicians of Xerox, it was a very exciting project, because technicians of Xerox would come to places to mend the machines, and they had to interact with other technicians. So they would they would write little notes to each other saying, oh, in this case the cover is too stiff, so a way around that is to cut the cable and wait until the part blah 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 arrives. And so it was a social experiment, because trying to make the knowledge within the enterprise be distributed. But for me and for my group at that stage, it was about reading these notes and trying to extract a database from that. So that's the only bit that I work a little bit more like database or knowledge graphs, which is something that I'm still doing nowadays. But at that stage we're doing it for parts of machines of Xerox. And that's when I got one of them, to me, one of life lessons is that, the technicians of Xerox were not extremely well paid. They're better paid then than many other people, but not exactly rich. And still they would leave money on the table rather than write in controlled natural language. So, there was an attempt to force them to write using specific expressions and verbs and this and that, and they would simply not do it. They said, oh, okay, for $10, but on the other hand, they felt like helping. The altruist thing of helping each other was there, and they would send the reports and stuff, but not in controlled language. So they would use their own words and their own expressions. So make of it what you want, but I think of it as being people need to communicate the way they want to communicate. So mathematicians should not be forced to write in lean. They should be allowed to write in whatever formal or informal language they want, and that's how they will produce more and stuff, and they will be happier.
So does that mean, you should be talking to us in Portuguese and we should be listening in English? I mean, like, doesn't there have to be an interface of somebody who wants to speak both languages?
And I don't think that goes that far. No, I think what I'm saying is just that, human language evolved in hundreds of thousands of years, and they are very clever. We can do an awful lot with them, and I don't think we should be forced. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love first order logic and higher order logic and type theory and all this stuff. That's great fun for me to work on them. But I think when we communicate, we should use human language. It doesn't have to be Portuguese. It doesn't have to be English. If you want to learn Portuguese, excellent. You should kind of learn Portuguese. And, and the machines are getting much better at that, but they're still far from where they need to be for us to do what you just said. I speak in Portuguese and you listen in English. And besides, after 40 years speaking English, I think for some things, I'm better in English than in Portuguese.
Dan, I think you want to live in a Hitchhiker's Guide world where they have fish in their ears and you can speak whatever and everyone will understand. Have you read that book?
Of course. And I watch it, and I actually kind of also had I have already I still have the radio version. So yes.
Oh,
and
wow.
the film is good.
Wow, that's awesome.
Hitchhikers is great.
But I mean, this is exactly what the kind of AI for math project that you're working on is, right? So that mathematicians don't have to write in lean. Maybe I'm getting ahead of our schedule, but
that's actually what I wanted to ask too. What is your view in, I think this week just came a major solution of an Erdős problem using lean and AI, right? What are your thoughts?
Okay, if you want to go straight into that, great. I think I first was more impressed than with that than anything else, because I think the math Olympiads don't impress me so much. Because as I keep saying, math Olympiads, there was a human who sat down and wrote a problem and made sure that it works, because you can't do that to your students. You can't send them exams that you can't solve yourself. So,
it's not a research problem.
A different game. It's not a research problem. Now, the problems that Erdős left are problems that he wanted to have a solution. But in this particular case, it looks like it was an easier one, not exactly a hard one. And again, I don't think machines can at the moment, and I don't think they will be able very soon to be. I don't think they will be able fairly soon to do any research, do any thinking by themselves. Not even for solving problems that are not very similar to other problems. It might be just because I'm getting old and incompetent. It does happen. People kind of lose their flexibility to kind of think with the new style. But I don't think that's the case. And I mean, I've been doing an awful lot of work on looking at LLMs and what they can do with language and with mathematical language. But mathematical language and this so-called informal mathematical language, which before this wave of formalization, we used to call it formal English, but now it's informal English, right? And I don't think, I mean, when you look at the mistakes that the machines make, that things like GPT-4 and 5 make, you know, it just doesn't look to me like I can. I mean, and of course, everyone knows you can't trust them as they are. So you have to then do something like send it to Lean or to another to improver to verify what's happening. And I feel that that I cannot trust any oracle. And we need an oracle because, I don't send to machines things that I already know how to do, right? So you need things that you don't understand. So, and, when they make so trivial mistakes, like not understanding that I gave it 2,000 versions of A implies A, and I wanted to just hear, yes, A implies A, yes, yes. But, still, it will come out with unknown. I don't know if A implies A. That makes me just, you see, the holes for other things, for understanding language, there's no big deal because, any human being can understand bits of the language here and bits there and have big holes in the middle. But for mathematics is supposed to be an edifice of constructions, concepts, and things that build from each other. So you can't say that my machine understands this very hard thing here, but fails completely in something that's totally obvious here. Again, this is just personal gut feelings.
I mean, what you're describing is whether the LLMs currently understand what they're doing, right? But does that extend to whether they ever can?
No. I think they definitely could ever. And, I think that's what I'm working for. I think one way to make sure that they could is actually kind of making sure that they have the basis sorted out. So kind of, you teach them as you teach kids, you kind of make sure that they generalize properly from, that they know all there is to know about kind of basic mathematics. If we could kind of make them more self-consistent and give them the information, more RAG, more retrieval augmented generation, more self-consistency, then they'll be able to do this stuff, I think. It's just that, I don't see people worrying about the self-consistency. There are papers about self-consistency, yes. But I haven't seen that happening in the mathematics side of stuff. And I haven't seen, it's such an obvious thing. And I don't see anyone talking about that anymore. In the 2016, for instance, people are talking about digitalizing the whole of mathematics of the world and having everything machine readable at least. And I still believe that if you have to have everything machine readable so that you can then start extrapolating and generating your own, in this case, the machine's own kind of mathematics. Sorry, I just wanted to finish that one because I left it in the middle.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think here on my end because I haven't been thinking too deeply about where does LLM fit in the bigger picture here, because I started learning Lean recently and I'm very surprised, like positively surprised by how good the language feels to use. And sometimes every now and then I try to get some LLMs. And I think right now it's kind of like a coin flip, whether it's going to be useful or not. What's what I'm doing. And like often enough it's just complete garbage. It's just, I have no idea what it's talking about, but helping me to find, I don't know, like mathly dilemmas and things like that. It's fairly useful. But one thing that I keep thinking, maybe the role of LLMs and artificial intelligence that some people argue for that can help is, like when we have a high level idea in mathematics and then you have to fill in all the minute details, right? Like actually sit down and like you envision something big, and you like your intuition can fairly show you that, okay, this makes a lot of sense, but you have to sit down and fill in the gaps, right? Maybe that's a good use for the LLMs, right? Like help you try to somewhat formally assist you with the boring details, right, of what you're trying to achieve. Maybe, I don't know.
But that's what they always, I mean, that's what the Turing Prover guys always did, right? You know, for that you don't normally, I mean, if you kind of have enough of a detailed proof, whatever you want, then you, I mean, it's actually back to front in some ways, because what you want is the LLMs to kind of have some sort of vague notion of where you want to go, and then kind of help you. I mean, the main way that people are using it is in terms of blueprints, right? You know, you get a mathematician to write how the proof should go, and kind of what are the concepts that you would go into and stuff. And then the Turing Prover will help to get the bits sorted out, but using the Turing Prover, not the LLM anymore. And I think that's a very good idea. And I have a new paper with someone from Indiana, Elif Uskopoulou, and I'm mispronouncing her name, she's Turkish. But she, what we're doing is exactly trying to say the dependency graph, what we're doing using language, is what actually is important to help with formalization. So kind of, you know, blueprints only exist at the moment for Lean. They don't exist for Isabel or Agda or Rock, but they could and they should. And I think kind of having the language version of them out there will help with that. So, I mean, I totally agree that the point is to have some sort of gist of the proof, a basic idea, and then kind of complete this stuff and ask the machine to help you complete this stuff. And again, I don't want to have a single machine that does that. I think, you know, I love Leonardo de Moura. He's a great guy. And all the guys in Lean are wonderful guys. But I don't want to have a single system that's used for that. I think it's important to have, the same way as it's important to have different programming language, it's important to have different Turing provers and different proof assistants with different characteristics. So on the other hand, eventually everything kind of ends up being humans talking to humans. So kind of human language is important too. So that's what we're doing.
How do you see what are your feelings being a mathematician about, you know, how much traction Turing provers are gaining with Lean in the math community? You know, Terence Tao is just finishing to release his analysis book using Lean, which I personally find is extremely exciting. You know, like we're kind of bursting the bubble in many ways. But how do you see I don't know, like how mathematics is evolving, or does it excite you at all?
Absolutely, yeah. It's very exciting. It's very exciting to see top mathematicians like Tim and Terry Tao kind of using the Turing provers for doing exceedingly frontier mathematics, and Peter Schultz and all the other guys too. So it's kind of, it's great. There's no but on coming up. It's just that, you know, I think that they still want other people to, I mean, it's not about just the very good mathematicians. It's about getting everyone. And that's another thing that I kind of am always going about. You know, you don't have to be a genius to be a mathematician. And you don't have to be a genius to produce mathematics that's useful. So, you know, every one of us has the right to kind of do stuff and to have good tools to do our stuff.
But what about in the other direction? Like, do you or other mathematicians who you speak to, are they kind of worried about the increasing role of AI in theorem proving? It's like kind of saying I could have a machine look at the Grand Canyon for me. It's like, no, I wanted to do that actually. And part of me is a little bit worried that it'll get too good and it'll spoil all the fun, like it's doing for artists right now, right?
Do you think so? I mean,
Well, not
about
right
the
now,
actors.
but that's the fear, right? For example, movies. Yeah.
It's a fear, and of course, the mathematicians have fears too, right? But I don't know. Maybe it's just because I'm an optimist about that. But I think it's just kind of will help us to do much more mathematics. And I mean, it is helping already, and will help much more. I kind of had this blog post in 2021 in the Topos Institute blog saying that what we need is kind of for mathematics to get uh, into the Industrial Revolution, because mathematics up to now is still done in a very artisanal way, right? So you think of something, you kind of write it, and you talk to your friends about it, and then you actually put it a preprint in the archive, and then you try to sell it to your community and stuff. And it's very one-on-one, maximum of 2-3 people in each paper and stuff. And I think it would be good to have the industrial mathematics, but in the same ways as we can have industrial food and industrial films and stuff, but you also have the artisanal one. You don't have to let go of this stuff, right? You can have both. And having industrial food production kind of made sure that many more humans survived. So I think having industrial mathematics will make lots of good things too. I mean, in certain parts of the world, people tend to think that mathematics is useless, that, the only mathematics that you want to pay for is the one that has immediate benefits. And I do not like that at all. I don't agree with that at all. I think it's very important to be able to do the mathematics that you feel. I mean, mathematics is art as well as being.
That's what I was thinking. Yes, I agree.
So, we want both.
How would industrial mathematics look like? What are your thoughts?
Oh, I think that's, it's going to look more like what the big projects like the liquid tensor experiment and the FPR, whatever
This is involving a huge amount of people in the same project where they can contribute somehow.
Yeah. And gotcha. I think that would be great, right? Because, there are some things that you say, I cannot bear to do this. This is so boring.
Yeah.
35 examples of something that have to check each one of the constants and stuff. No. And some other people kind of actually find it addictive as a game and kind of exciting and fun, and they don't go to sleep because they are doing it. So that's cool. I mean, very much. I mean, I want to have one of these guys near me, kind of saying. So, and I think these big projects kind of allow you to do that, right? I was in a conference, and Kim Morrison was talking about Lean and kind of explaining what the blueprint was like and stuff like that. And she kind of put up an open thing on the web to show the blueprint. And she looked and said, "Oh boy, I went to bed at midnight last night, and there was still something in this particular problem that had not been solved. And I could show you the blue and the green because no one had finished that part of the proof yet. Now it's all green. The theorem is completely proved." And that was 9 a.m. in the Pacific time, right? And that's very exciting. That's very exciting to see that, while you're sleeping, someone else kind of doing stuff just because they wanted, kind of finish the stuff that you and another 1,000 people were worrying about. So this is what I think industrial mathematics could be if it went the right way. But there's lots of possibilities of being the wrong way, right? So we have to worry about. Like, for instance, I have worked in software sweatshop places where, people are pushing code here until 9 p.m. And then kind of people in India kind of start their day and they push code on their side, kind of, and things never stopped, but just to kind of sell more stuff, more crap. You said I could. Yeah. So it's kind of, it's important to know that there's an awful lot of sweatshop stuff all over the world, even in Silicon Valley.
Could we talk a little bit about Topos Institute then? Because we got all the way to Xerox PARC, and now what's the story of how did you like what is Topos Institute? What is going on there?
Okay, we can talk about Topos Institute, but I think I wanted to kind of first mention Cool before that. Cool was a startup that I actually left PARC for, and it was about search. It was about to reinventing search. It was a big competitor to Google.
Okay.
And it failed
Bold.
miserably. Very bold, very bold. We had some people who had actually done that once of reinventing search for Google.
That was 2001 too, right?
No, that was 2008. The second big burst.
Okay.
But my friends in Cool kind of had already kind of sold one new version of Google to Google. It was something called the Tera Google. And if you look up Anna Patterson, you see that she did that. And she said, well, let's do it again. And so we kind of joined. I joined. She invited me to join Cool, and we tried to do it. And, the web does things very fast, so you probably haven't even heard about it. But, for a while, was the biggest failure in the history of the internet. The kind of people wrote memes and stuff, and there's still stuff in the web about how bad we failed with the search engine. But it was exciting because you could see the reach of things that one does kind of in labs and stuff, and how different it is when it's actually affecting people all over the place. And we had a very prepared launch, and then the launch was overtook by someone in New Zealand breaking the news before. It was, but for me, it was very.
So for listeners unfamiliar, like what was the selling point for this new startup, and why did it fail exactly?
Yeah, this new search engine had 2 or 3 main things, and some of them, they were really cool, and they are still kind of not done in some ways, because the main thing was much more websites, kind of not being able to deal with a huge amount of websites that Google couldn't do before. The second thing was doing pictures, and that was the failure of Cool, was doing pictures. So every entry. I'm sorry, there's a garbage can here, but I hope you don't get it. But instead of giving 10 links like Google used to give you, you would give a grid with the 10 links and 10 pictures, and kind of finding these pictures and actually making sure that they were properly connected to the entry was the hardest bit. And it was absolutely beautiful when it worked. Like, for instance, if you ask for works of Jane Austen, it was gorgeous. Or galaxies, pictures that galaxies, you could get wonderful things. But making sure that really worked the way, it was, of course, all machine learning based. And machine learning, as we know, has some issues with correctness. So there was lots of people complaining an awful lot, and there was lots of issues and stuff. But, I can send you some old websites so that you can see what happened. But later we actually made something that Elon Musk is doing now, because we had something called the CPedia for Cool Wikipedia. And cool is a word. It's not written COOL. It was written CUIL, and it's a word from Irish, from Gaelic, or something like that. My friends tried to say that it was knowledge in Gaelic, but some people didn't agree. But that was a theory. And we kind of, this CPedia was also extremely. At that stage, I was working this startup, and my husband was working in a different startup. his startup was successful, was acquired by Microsoft, and ours failed miserably, and people went back to Google, where they had come from, sort of stuff. But the thing about the because we kind of had these two startups in competition, kind of direct competition, so kids in the house first were absolutely happy, kind of saying, "Oh, mom and dad cannot talk about work anymore." So wonderful. But then kind of situation got a little bit more worrying, because we couldn't talk about work. It was kind of a very Mr. and Mrs. Smith sort of situation, and people kind of made jokes about it. But I was very happy when my daughter kind of said to me that we had all this problem with the launching and failure and this and that. But my daughter kind of said to me at that stage that only Cool could provide a timeline for whatever event you wanted. So it is something that you still can't get professionally, officially done.
What kind
at
of
that stage you could say a timeline for an event. So if you said something like independence of Brazil, it would show the 7th September 1822, would show what happened before, who were the main actors and stuff, and kind of provide you with this timeline that you could just download for yourself. It was beautiful, yeah. And kind of in 2008, that was kind of cool enough that my daughter, who kind of, kids always hate their parents and always say that, that they don't, what they do is ridiculous, right? But my daughter kind of liked that and said, yeah, that stuff was PowerSet, which is, it was a big thing in 2007, 2008 too. But, only we could do the pretty. PowerSet was this startup that also was a search engine, but it was acquired by Bing. And Bing then made a bit of a song and dance about having the ability to read the web, because it was based on the stuff that we are doing in Xerox. So it was a spin-off from Xerox, from PARC. And the good thing that we had then was a full corpus made out of websites in the whole of the world, all kind of lost because the Xerox moved away from that, and all the code and all the data disappeared. Kind of sad. Yes. I think Google acquired some of the patents, but not those. I don't know what happened to the data there. I mean, I know a little bit about the one from PowerSet because I actually managed eventually to get a young PhD student to reproduce this code from scratch. So it never got to be as good as the code from Xerox PARC, but the universe had moved, so there was many more tools that we could use. So she could just use the newer tools with the old ideas and have a very nice system that would do entailment and contradiction detection, meaning that you kind of would read a piece of text and read some other piece of text and either say that the second one was entailed by the first one, so helps with summarization, stuff like that, or it was contradictory, which is kind of very important, particularly when you want to have a database of some sort, right? And or it was neutral. It kind of, had nothing to do with one with each other. So this is something that I'm still working. If you look at my website, you'll see that's still there, kind of as a project.
So what I think is interesting about this is I think one of the fears maybe of academically inclined people when they move into industry is that you might work at a startup and do something really cool, and then it will go bust, and then everything that you've done has gone up in flames. Whereas at least if you were in academia, you published a paper, and then maybe, nobody reads the paper quite possibly, but at least it's out there.
That's right. I think that is a sensible fear, and I was really cross with 9 years of Xerox PARC and not being able to take the work that I'd done with me, having to do all this stuff to kind of it took more than 12 years to do it again. I mean, the PhD of Katarina was only done in 2020, no, 2019. And I left back in 2008. So kind of quite a few years to kind of try to get it back. But the point is not just that it will go up in flames. The point is that sometimes it just gets stuck somewhere in someone's vault for no good reason, like it did with PARC, and sometimes gets sold and used by other people. I think, if other people still use it, it's still better than if they just do it to kill the ideas, right? Kind of, and that happens an awful lot in Silicon Valley too. Kind of big tech kind of goes and kills something just because they don't want it to be out.
So what do you see today, like kind of as somebody who kind of sees the broader beauty and value of science, the role of academia versus the role of industry research today versus in the past? Is there any? Yeah.
Yeah, kind of. That is a good one, because I think, it's something that I was talking to Pedro in Brasilia when I actually met him. I think there's a need for more variation, more styles of interaction between industry and academia, and between science and society. And some people kind of try to think about that as in terms of things like the FRO, the lean FRO, the foundation, whatever.
How Topos Institute come into the picture, and what's the idea, what's going on there? Because Wikipedia says that you're a co-founder there, so I'm very curious.
Yeah, I feel that I am a co-founder there, yes. There are 6 people in the founding picture from the Topos Institute. You can find it on our blog. And I feel that I was one of the founders, but there's always some artistic differences and stuff like that. And I don't think people there think so, but I do feel, but I'm not kind of, we have artistic difference, but they're not that deep artistic difference. So kind of still good to be part of the group, and still good to do stuff with them.
Yeah, so what's the kind of impetus behind the Topos Institute? What was the kind of main idea there?
I think that is really kind of Brandon and David kind of said, why can't we just kind of do our research, and instead of, like I was saying to you early on, getting a principal to stand up for me and kind of be a research assistant, why can't we just do it ourselves? And that was the idea that Brendan and David had. At that stage, I was working for Samsung Research America. Research. Oh, sorry. Anyways, another acronym that escapes me. But so I was working for them, and I said, "This is a great idea. Let's kind of think about category theory for programming, for computing in general." And I do believe that that's a good thing. And kind of I said, "Oh, let's do it." First I said, I don't know if I will be able to do much. But then I was laid off from Samsung in February 2020. So I said, why not? Let's go for it. And it was, it was a wonderful thing when they came up with this. So that's why they are kind of really more founders, because they actually kind of did come up with the idea and actually kind of got the money to start it off. Some money from some projects from David, and some kind of philanthropies work, money from people like Elias Khan that does quantum net, whatever kind of they do quantum computing. So kind of he was one of the founders of a Cambridge quantum group or something like that became Continuum, and so it's they've been acquired by Honeywell or something. So yeah, kind of I think it's a wonderful thing, and that part of your question, whether I think category theory is important. Yes, I definitely. It is something that we all, I think, in Topos believe in. That category theory is a great tool for computing in general, and programming languages in particular. Programming language is the best application we have so far. But there's lots more than programming languages.
Why?
Right?
Why is it such a great
Why so?
for PL?
Sorry.
Why is category theory so great for PL?
Well, because syntax is a bitch. There's too much syntax. You can do whatever you want with syntax, right? And category theory gives you structure behind the syntax. If you have to do something, if the stuff that you're doing has some chance of being good in the end, it has to satisfy some structure. So the thing about syntax is that it gives you too much rope to hang yourself with. You need guidelines. You need things that you can, and mathematics does give you that. There is, mostly in terms of semantics, but not only. And I think, I take the point that lots of people said to me before, that that there is a problem with category theories. Sometimes they're just kind of rewriting whatever people did with their own funky language, and kind of just think that they explain things when they actually now much more complicated than they were before. So I take this point, and I think category theory as obfuscation is a horrible thing, and it happens quite a bit. But that's not what I'm for, or the guys in Topos are for. We are about kind of really making things clear and using the structures that we discover through mathematics in the right way. Sometimes we mess it up too, but it happens. Like this Thursday, there was a woman talking about concrete syntax, and how concrete syntax in the Topos colloquium, and talking about how concrete syntax is not given its due respect. That people, concrete syntax is the interface between humans and computers, and that we normally only think about one half of this interface, meaning making the computers easier for humans to understand. But we should also make humans easier for machines in some ways. So you should kind of have a more. She was talking about the fact that mostly people talk about, when we talk about syntax, we kind of normally say things like, I'm sorry if I'm bike shedding, or I'm sorry for being, the expression bike shedding. It's because, sometimes there's serious issues in discussion. And actually, people then talk about the bike shed because you're talking about salaries of the teachers in school. But it's so much easier to get to talk about the color that the bike shed is going to have, that you kind of end up kind of on this bad thing. So it is similar about syntax, because people think that the important thing is semantics, and I think it is, but you can't just, the syntax actually forces your semantics in certain directions. So it's just kind of, go and watch the talk. She kind of gave a very good talk explaining how sometimes you're just using the syntax, how much more important than it looks like syntax is. So back to, I'm sorry, I'm kind of going around circles here, but let me try to clarify. What I'm saying is that I still think that semantics is major, semantic rules, and you need to kind of prove things, do what they do, using good mathematical tools. And category theory helps with that, because it actually abstracts from the data that you have what are the important structures there. And I think programming languages kind of show this case very clearly. But as I was saying, there's lots of other applications of category theory in computer science that are useful tools, things like concurrency and kind of effects and the stuff that you mentioned before, but also kind of different kinds of logic, different kinds of modal logic, different kinds of linear-like logics, like separation logic and stuff like that. So there's an awful lot that category theory can help you with. And also kind of in other areas that we haven't, that I'm not an expert, like biology and I don't know. I was going to say material science, but I don't think I know of anyone doing that. So kind of chemistry, physics, kind of all sorts of other things. And on the other hand, there is this danger of category theory just used as an obfuscation tool. Just kind of the same way as I hate people who can put Greek letters everywhere. Kind of it's against my religion, I don't know if you've seen this, but people who think that syntax is in Latin letters and semantics is in Greek letters. Why? The Greek alphabet is not big enough. It just you can't remember if it's chi or psi or there are some that are good, like lambda. We like lambda, right? But lots of this stuff, it's very bad obfuscation. It's kind of trying to pretend that you understand more than you do just by using symbols when a good word would do.
Is there a good way to tell whether somebody, it's hard for me to tell when somebody is about to, what somebody's doing with category theory is going to be meaningful or not until, it's too late, until I've spent a few hours with it. Is there kind of, I don't know, a quick way to tell if it's going to be obfuscation, or you have a philosophy behind it? I don't know.
I don't think there's an easy way. I get taken in still kind of sometimes. And, and I've been at it for a long, long time. So, but I still sometimes have to spend hours thinking about whether this is actually, whether the structure that's coming out does make sense. I think the only thing is usual critical thinking tools, right? But then you have to understand the stupid thing first. So then you say, well, was that worth it? So yeah, I think I agree with you. It's lots of times I just kind of only discovered that there was obfuscation after the event, after spending all the time to. But that's another place where the LLMs are good. You ask them, and they only look at the words. They don't read the symbols, right? So kind of sometimes that's enough.
But also so I wonder if maybe there is a little bit of like, people's brains are wired differently. Like, you may say that it's very useful, but you did write your PhD thesis on Dialectica categories, so that's you're going to be biased in favor of those things. So maybe could you? Your background was in pure math, so probably that. At what point did you make your way into category theory? And maybe this would be a good time to kind of talk about your PhD research in this space too.
Perhaps, yes. Yes, I actually, as I was saying early on, I started thinking that computer science was a good thing to move on to during my master's. And I was saying I started doing things like abstract data types because I thought, I was coming from algebra. Algebra is something that you're right, I have loads of biases in the direction of algebraic thinking. So at that stage, I thought, okay, but actually the reason why I moved was more logic. At the end of my undergrad, I started thinking about logic, and I thought, there's logic missing in the world. We need more people who reason rationally about things. And then I kind of learned the beginnings of doing about categorical logic. I started thinking, well, actually, it was not categorical logic at that stage, was proof theory, kind of formal systems of proof theory. At that stage, I did not hate Greek symbols, so kind of I did have all my signals and stuff, and doors and stuff. But so, it was because I learned about this link between logic and algebra on this very high level of category theory. And when I applied and I sent that famous letter to Gandhi, I was already kind of trying to think along those lines. He is famous for doing recursion theory, and I had read a little bit about how recursion theory could perhaps be categorified. It's something that I'm still doing. Like, it's a paper from last year on kind of thinking about recursion theory using algebraic tools. I think algebra is a wonderful thing and actually kind of, to me at least, clarifies lots of things. If you can write them into pure algebra, you kind of see much better what is happening. So I kind of, when the guy that I applied to work in Rio, Professor Paulo Veloso, who died recently, unfortunately, he was an algebraist. He had done his PhD in UCLA, I think, or Berkeley. No, it was UCLA, I think. I don't know. He was in the States, kind of in this, people never think about what happened before they arrive in a university, right? So he was my teacher. He had been somewhere before. I don't remember what. And so, I kind of talked to him about the idea that I wanted to use. I wanted to kind of learn more algebra and use algebra to understand logic better. Because now, okay, that one you might put in your thing or not, but I have this horrible thing that I was very arrogant when I was young. So I kind of I first learned about Gensen's sequent calculi and stuff like that. And I read Pravitz's 1965 book on natural deduction. And I was such a horrible person that I looked at my teacher then, Luis Carlos Pereira, famous logician from Brazil, and said, you guys logicians, you actually you have to be more mathematical, right? You guys kind of invent several different systems to talk about the same thing. Can't you just make up your mind and decide which one's the best? Which is such a stupid thing to say, right? But, I was talking about axioms because I had learned about axioms in one course. And then from him, I learned about natural deduction. And then by myself, I discovered sequent calculus. So there are three different presentations of the same thing, right? Proposition logic or first order logic is exactly the same thing. But you have the three different presentations. And I said, well, in mathematics, said I, kind of from the top of my ignorance, in mathematics, we actually kind of clean it up when we go around and kind of improve things. And then we get to the best definition. The best definition of a group is a set with an operation that can be commutative or not and has a unity and blah, 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 and satisfies these three equations. And so, it's a total stupid idea, right? Because, to do real science, you actually have to have different perspectives on the same things. And I think we do need to have, category theory allows you to have a perspective that subsumes some of the others, but that allows you to kind of prefer the other perspectives if you so wish. So, it's the same old story. I think the whole of my academic career is based on this idea of Curry-Howard, just based on this idea that good logic corresponds to good algebraic structure, corresponds to good programming, calculation, computation tools.
So a couple of weeks ago, before this interview, we interviewed Andre Bauer. It's not out yet as we were speaking, but one of the things that he did mention, he talked a little bit about Dialectica, and he did mention pretty quick that his view on Dialectica is almost as kind of like the Curry-Howard is going in one direction and Dialectica is coming the other way around, right? Like taking proofs of not B to, well, Curry Howard is taking proofs of A into proofs of B, and Dialectica is taking proofs of not B into proofs of not A, like kind of modus tollens instead of yes confers, right? Is that correct? Let's talk a little bit about Dialectica and about your thesis more specifically.
Right. Okay. I think no, I don't agree with Andre on that one.
Maybe I got wrong, so maybe this is
No. Yeah, no. I think the work I did on Dialectica was based on this idea of Martin Hyman's, that if you can abstract enough to look at the interpretation that Gödel provided, and just think about the domains and codomains of the transformations that he produced. So let me give you my version of what the Dialectica is. The Dialectica is a very interesting, a very clever trick to transform formulas of logic into formulas of a specific shape. What is the specific shape? It's the shape of exists X for all Y something. And you try to make this something quantifier free as much as you can. And what is kind of extremely clever on the part of Gödel is that instead of is that he explains that, I mean, he doesn't explain much. He actually just gives the thing and let it
just do it.
But you can yeah, just, it's as if it was an obvious idea to kind of transform sort of formulas into formulas. Yeah. But he does say a little bit, at least. He says something like, to understand arithmetic, you kind of can first think about it as class. I mean, he's thinking about the fact that, in Trostrom, whom I get all these ideas from, because that's the person that I read most and stuff. Trostrom says that he kind of says that Gödel is trying to get consistency of arithmetic, and he knows, because he'd done the modal translation, the not translation early on, that it's enough to do it for the intuitionistic version, because anything that's classical he can transform into something that's intuitionistic using his other Gödel translation, the more famous Gödel translation, instead of the Dialectica. Now, the way I got into this was kind of very much just because I like algebra, and instead of kind of giving me all this conversation about how Gödel was trying to to decide whether kind of Hilbert was right on his program or not, and kind of trying to kind of find out what I think he did try to show that actually there is an awful lot that you can do with simple functionals. That's Gödel's main thing, is to say that when you transform any formula into a formula of this shape, that he did it with the Dialectica, you actually kind of can reduce everything to simple functions, and simple functions, kind of natural numbers and functions from natural numbers to natural numbers and natural numbers to natural numbers to natural numbers and stuff like that, he felt were much more concrete and much more apprehensible. I mean, something that you could comprehensible than formulas in logic. He was against the intuitionistic, saying that intuitionists, or kind of Heiting and people like that, are thinking of formulas in general. It's too complicated, he used to say. It's kind of, I don't know how to make them concrete. And kind of functions, he felt that are much more concrete. Some people would say the opposite is true, that actually the functions are much more non-understandable. But for Gödel, they were kind of, that's why he kind of came up with System T, saying, that's all I need. That's all anyone needs. Kind of recursion and the normal logical explanations and functions, and that's all. So when I got to that, I kind of was given by Martin just an algebraic problem. Had nothing to do with the logic. I didn't even look. I mean, I only kind of started thinking about the logic many years later. Because I had just a problem which was kind of given this notion of an object which has 2 bits and a relation between the 2 bits, and notion of functions that go down and then go back the other way, which is what the functions of Gödel do. What can we know about the algebraic structure produced by these things? So for me, it was merely an algebraic problem. And Martin said to me, oh, go around, think about that and prove that this is a Cartesian closed category. And I tried. And at a certain stage, kind of in desperation, I came to him and said, look, it isn't. I cannot prove that. Only thing I can prove is that that's a symmetric monoidal closed category. So it has a tensor, but it doesn't have a product, and it does not have a real function space. It just has a function space with respect to this tensor. And instead of kind of saying to me, go back to Brazil, you're a stupid woman and can't do anything, can't even calculate a simple thing like this small algebraic structure, he said, oh, I've heard about some stuff that Girard is doing in France that looks a bit like what you're saying, looks like a little bit like a tensor and not a real product and stuff. Maybe instead of being logic as we know it, because we know it as intuitionistic logic, not classical, maybe it's linear logic. And so it was really pretty good for me and for Girard too, because he could say, oh, this woman found a model of linear logic was very new then. So woman found a model of my logical system in the writings of Gödel, our hero. So it was good for everyone, and so much so that the guy who is normally considered the guy who created the models of categorical models of linear logic, Robert Seeley, actually we went to a conference in Boulder, Colorado, and in the drinks before the conference started, he said to me, also, what you're doing with Martin Hyland? And I said, oh, I kind of have this thing which happens, it's an interesting thing because it officially comes from Gödel, but I don't understand anything about that. But, kind of algebraically, just this and that. And Martin says it's connected to linear logic and stuff. And he said, oh, you didn't do that. I said, yes, I did. No, you didn't do that. Yes, I did. I'll show you. I had the handwritten thing. And not being very, I was very trusty because I just gave him which was the beginning of my thesis, right? And he said, next day I have a slot on the conference. I think you should talk instead of me. What I have is not as interesting as what you have. And so I gave my first talk. And I was told the day I gave the talk next day, as I was saying to you, my English is not that good. And so I kind of gave the talk and some people in the category theory community at that stage were extremely vicious, don't waste our time with things that are too trivial. So I was panicking. I spent the whole night kind of thinking about it and stuff. And the next morning, I gave the talk. I'm sure that Peter Fried was making a joke about Dialectica being something to do with Hegel or kind of Marxism or something. I'm sure I don't know what the joke was, but I carried on kind of, okay. I explained, no, it's just the name of the journal, nothing to do with Marxism. And carried on. But, I didn't understand the comments at all and stuff. But I gave a talk, and then that appeared that's my first paper ever. And Google Scholar says it hasn't got a single citation. I feel extremely offended because it is, it's the basis of everything. It's called the Dialectica categories. And what happens is that probably they kind of confounded later on with the thesis, because the thesis has lots of citations and stuff. But the paper is from the EMS, and the EMS also kind of at this stage didn't get it. Whatever. But the fact is that still to this day has no citations at all.
But PhD theses are so much better to read than papers. You should just write PhD theses.
Well, my PhD is very short. It's only 88 pages, so
Wow.
Okay. Kind of commenting on how, I mean, very terse. I actually did not understand how. I mean, it was stupidly written. So so that's the other thing. You said to me that you thought I was good at communicating. Boy, I was so impressed, because I think I'm horrible at communicating. I try my best, but I'm not good. I don't kind of get important ideas over. I kind of end up talking about.
I think you're being too harsh on yourself, Valeria. You're great. Don't worry.
I mean, that's something that I think maybe the best communicators are the most humble and the most aware of, the fact that they're always improving. But I mean, do you feel like you haven't improved at all since then?
No, I improved. It's very easy to improve when you try to kind of make your students do better, right? Because you kind of say, come on, you've forgotten to tell why you're doing this. Come on, you've missed this. You went from A to C, but there was a B here. That was the reason. I'm trying desperately to improve. I kind of work very hard on it, but.
What are some of the comments you give most often to your students? I mean, you've talked about this ABC thing, but is there a more specific?
I think the main thing is this business of explaining why you're doing things, because there's lots of mathematics that you can do that are stupid, right? That, there are things that you can calculate and that they don't tell you or anyone else anything.
They're funny problems, but what about, right? So what?
Well, sometimes they're not even fun, I mean, but they're kind of calculations that you can do. That, I mean, the computers can do those, right? Kind of just putting definitions together and kind of coming up with something else. So that, I think that's, I mean, and this is my more thing. In my thesis, for instance, there's, I think, one page explaining why I'm doing that, and it's a very bad explanation. But you can read it. The thesis is available from Cambridge as one of the technical reports, and hence it's easy to read it. I mean, Cambridge keeps.
I was talking to a friend professor. I'm not going to name him because I don't know how he feels about it. But I was talking to a friend professor that he just migrated from philosophy math into computer science. You're gonna know who I'm talking about, but I'm not gonna name him. And he was saying that computer science is better about giving motivation about the problems, right? Because that's how our papers usually start with. It's like a very strong introduction, motivation, like, hey, this is first, this is the problem, this is why the problem is important, this is the background, right? And then you build from there. Whereas in mathematics, maybe it's not as valued as a community, as a field, right? I don't know.
And there's a culture of being very much to the point and not using one extra word if you don't need it, right? I mean, and that's a bad culture in mathematics.
I see. Trying to keep things as concise as possible, I guess, to the point, and don't waste our intellect here. We're all smart.
That's right. I mean, so, the thing is, in good mathematical papers, people do know why they're doing what they're doing, but you expect your audience, your readership, to know it by themselves too, which is a very bad idea, particularly when the community explodes, because then you don't have the same reasons for thinking that the same things are important, right? So, it is important to explain why you're doing what you're doing.
To make the devil's advocate, when I was working on my PhD thesis, you have to keep going back a lot on papers solving similar things, like slightly different little things, and then I just start getting so bored with all the introductions being the same stuff again and again and again. I'm like, for God's sake, give me a different introduction, right? Like everything, I already know all of this. I already know the motivation. I don't care about this. I know what I'm doing, right? But
but then you have to provide a good motivation, one that's new. It's the onus is on you.
Yeah. There you go. Talking about linear logic, I feel like, okay, these ideas are already around since the 80s, early 90s, but even nowadays we're still
85 is the beginning of linear logic.
but we're still catching up with those ideas in programming languages. Like, what are your thoughts? Is there something particularly, I don't know, like why are we taking so long to implement these ideas and to use them in programming languages?
Right. I mean, yes, I think there's lots that we haven't done yet. And I don't, I think, I mean, now you're talking about philosophy of mathematics or philosophy of logic, right?
That's the best part.
Yes.
That's
That's good. I think, I mean, in one hand, I just feel happy and flattered that people are still talking about the dialectica and inventing new things to say about the dialectica. Because I think there's still lots to talk about the dialectica. And, I mean, not only in the application side, which is quite a bit, but also about the essentials as well. I mean, of course, lots of the recent work that I've been doing in dialectica is actually extending it from the propositional version that I was discussing a minute ago, this business of domains and codomains and stuff, to, I mean, first order logic is kind of easy, but not totally. And then we've been doing high order logic and fibrations and dependent type theory and stuff like that. That's what I've been doing with David Trotter and Matteo Spadetto and John Weinberg. So, there's an awful lot about that. But, so, linear logic can be done the name of the game is to find the things that are important enough that they can be seen and done in different setups, right? So, it's not a coincidence that we use kind of intuitionistic logic for all sorts of different applications and stuff like that. And it's not a coincidence that the re-understanding of classical and intuitionistic logic that we got via linear logic is still producing new applications and new uses of this stuff. So one of the things that's also kind of coming back to fashion is constructive modal logics. I personally only discovered constructive modal logics because the Bang operator of linear logic looks like a box, looks like a necessity operator, has the same shape. So, if you like algebra, you kind of just look at this little rule, and it's the same thing. It's the rest of the context that changed. And, the fact is that people keep using notions of necessity or in many different directions, right? You can use it for security, you can use it for temporal expansions, you can use it for as kind of monads and co-monads for mixing imperative programming with functional programming. There's all sorts of applications that you have for this very basic notions that logic gives you. So discovering or inventing linear logic like Girard did was very exciting because, you wouldn't, because you're kind of from a newer time when these things are all around. But, everyone else, before 1984 or 1995, people did not think that it would make sense to vary the structural rules of Gensin. Was something that everyone would agree was with the structural rules of Gensin. They are much more natural than trying to enforce a resource-conscious reading on that. So, category theorists had thought about that because they didn't have any compromise. They didn't have any relaying to logic. So they they did think about tensor products, and Jim Lambeck had already done this side of linear logic in the 1950s, 58. So, he was thinking about Jensen systems without structural rules. But what is important about linear logic is not simply thinking about logic without structural rules, as much as that was a big move in the 80s. What's important is this business of having your cake and eating it. It's kind of being able to remove the structural rules and put them back in a controlled way using your modality, using your bang operator and your why not operator. So that was the genius of Girard as far as that bit is concerned. And I think there's still kind of plenty of other applications that we haven't seen for it yet. So one of the most exciting ones are the ones that you mentioned in your message about differential linear logic. And, hopefully we will be able to kind of connect that to things like Dialectica. I mean, there are papers already, right? There's Marie-Jean, André Bauer also kind of have a paper, and Pierre-Marie Pedro, who was one of your invitees before, also kind of did that for his PhD thesis. I kind of have a bit of a bone to pick with Pierre-Marie because I think, because the thing is, he has this paper called a functional interpretation, as if the Dialectica was not functioning. And he tried to say that. I mean, Pierre-Marie is great with the jokes and the
he's a very
words.
Very funny guy. Like you spend 5 minutes with him and he's already making fun with everything and you, and it's great being around.
That's right. But the fact is that the Dialectica, as I had it was already using type theory, and it was already so much so that as I say, when I started doing it, it was just an algebraic game or puzzle. You have this algebraic structure. What can you say about that? And yes, in my thesis, I proved that you could do a sound interpretation of Gödel's system, a version of Gödel's system, into this algebraic game called Dialectica categories. But the next work that I did with Martin Hyland, Nick Benton, and Gavin Bierman was about saying what was the type theory of linear logic. We have a collection of papers on that, 3 papers on that or 4. And what we showed then was that we actually showed that in these papers together, we showed that actually the categorical models that we had been thinking of, I was thinking of, the ones that the Dialectica categories were, actually did correspond to a type theory. And that's what was the way we saw it was to say that some Abramsky version of the type theory was wrong because it did not satisfy substitution. And that was something that Phil Wadler had mentioned when with his papers, which was called "There is no substitute for linear logic." So Phil was also being clever and using this title for 2 different things. One of them is to say there's no substitute, so it's a wonderful thing that we have linear logic now. And the second thing was the mathematical content, meaning the substitution is not working because the categorical model of Robert Seeley did not satisfy the properties that the type theory of Samson-Brunsk produced. So we produced a correct type theory, one that does satisfy substitution. So, I mean, for me, this was really very big. And, okay, I did not, as I was saying, I'm very bad at communicating, so I did not make that very clear, neither on my part, on my work on categories, nor on the fact that, I think one of the best papers, more clear papers that I have written actually is not a paper. It was a technical report from Cambridge, which you also can read because the guys are good. They keep things in print or on the web, What I explain how it's the four of us. So, and it's the paper that became two different papers, one on categorical models and one on the type theory. But the technical report has the two together and explains how you take the logic and invent the type theory for that in such a way as to preserve the categorical equations. So,
and by preserving the equations, I assume then you also preserve the interesting properties that we care about in type theory.
That's correct. When you preserve the type theory, then you preserve subject reduction, kind of meaning that, and beta reduction. So, I think when Pierre-Marie says that Dialectica is not working, he's just kind of not reading it properly, because it is. It did work kind of in the beginning of the 90s with this, And again, the paper on the beginning of the 90s was really very good because you had two category theorists and two functional programmers. And the functional programmers, Nick and Gavin, were very good at telling us, this syntax needs to change here, or kind of this syntax is not working. I mean, there's things that they actually kept repeating to me and Martin was, functional programmers don't like eta expansion. We like beta reductions, but we don't like eta expansions. And we kind of kept saying to them, well, but look, we need both to have your categorical model satisfy equalities. You can do reductions without the two of them. But if you want real equations, you need both betas, etas, and commutative conversions, which are a pain in the neck for everyone concerned. But that is the TLDR version of these 3-4 papers in the beginning of the 90s is the computation type theory that Samson provided is not good enough. It's missing one bit, which is the substitution for the diamond things. And we did tell Samson before. We sent him a message saying, look, it's not working here. You can make it work by saying functional programmers don't care about substitutions when you give variables. You can say that, the functional programmers only care about empty proving M of type A, the term M of type A. So only in closed terms. So then you're okay. But if you want to have kind of full substitution, meaning gamma proves A, delta and A proves B, then gamma dot A, comma delta proves B, then that theory doesn't work. You need to kind of do what we did. Or something else like what Frank Fanning did, and stuff like that. So, and that fact that this thing is useful for modal logics is very good too, because then you can do an awful lot of different notions of boxes and different notions of why not. You can do, deontic things, epistemic things, temporal things. Deontic things are things like you ought to do this, or so it's kind of other versions which kind of all satisfy the same rules in abstract terms. So that's why there's a huge community working on constructive model logics now, because, the guys have been working on this different kinds of modalities. And because that's another question that you have. What do I do philosophers and what philosophers can tell us? So the thing is, the philosophers or philosophical logicians had been thinking about all these modalities with or without a basis that constructive for many, many decades, right? They tend to think more in terms of cryptic semantics, but neighborhood semantics, or all sorts of some different ways of thinking about, but it is the same sort of rules. And then if you, they never put the terms that functional programmers do. So the different thing is that functional programmers need the terms to explain what the logic is doing. The philosophical logicians don't, but they have done lots of work that can just be lift off. So kind of functional programmers can, the late Alan Jeffrey, I said to him, look, we're just using this work from Curry in the 50s. We have this paper that's without Martin. It's me, Gavin, and Nick. We have a paper called Computational Types, something. So we kind of just looked at type theory, looking like this computational lambda calculus of Eugenio Morgi, so pure semantics of lambda calculus. And we could find exactly the same rules in Curry's book from 1952. And Curry said, this is a bad model logic. And, logically speaking, it's bad, but it was very good for functional programmers, for semantics of programs, for whatever. For monads and stuff, right? This is the monadic lambda calculus. So that's part of what you're saying, what we can learn from the philosophers and what the philosophers can learn from us. They can learn that if they use terms, they can do more stuff. And we can learn some of their tricks, like labeling sequence, nesting sequence, all sorts of different syntactic devices. But if we learn from their tricks, we want them coming with semantics. We don't want categorical semantics, preferably. We don't want just the trick, right? And that's another thing that I spent decades of my life saying is functional programmers need to talk to philosophical logicians, because philosophical logicians like to do this business of playing with the systems as little algebraic games. And philosophical logicians should see what the guys have done in functional programming, because they are choosing different systems for different reasons. So the temporal logics that the guys use in functional programming are very different from the temporal logics that the philosophical guys normally like. But you should put the two together. I have a paper from 2015 saying, I spent since 1999 first flock, I've been talking to the guys saying, talk to each other, please. Let's talk.
You remind me of when I was a kid and my mom would put me in a room like, you two, you and your brother, figure it out. You talk and figure it out.
Absolutely. That's how I feel. Exactly like your mom saying, friends, you're thinking about the same thing. You could help each other. Why don't you talk more?
I don't even know where to find a philosophical logician. Are they in the philosophy department? Like,
some of them are. Some are in computer science. Some in AI, logic for AI. So in this case, I'm talking about people like Ian Shillito, who is now it's a new guy, but Anupam Das does some. Anupam is much more computational. Does computational complexity, but person like Nicola Olivetti, there's an awful lot of the person that I'm thinking of is Ranald Cluston, now in Australia. Alex Cavus, if you kind of, he kind of tried to look at some of the philosophy.
The main thing here, for example, is that you never participated at Flocks, have you? For example.
No, I don't even know that.
Yeah. Like the kind of conferences that we hang out at is not the conferences they will hang out at, right? So it's a kind of like choosing your community as well, which was very fun for me to participate.
But come on, Flock has lots of functional programmers.
There is, but it's not really our thing usually. Like the thing that we're usually working on. That's my point.
Yeah, I think
Lakes as well.
And Popple has lots of stuff too, kind of. So
I don't know. I feel like Popple is very applied these days. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel. I'm saying these things.
It's always been more applied than Lakes.
Yeah, right. I am looking for. I'm applying for PhDs right now, and I'm trying to get into more the logic side of things now. Actually, I'm even applying to a philosophy department at UCL. Actually, kind of afraid that I have to do a writing sample for some philosophy people. That makes me really afraid.
Yeah, yeah.
But anyways, there is one other thing that I still want to touch on, and I think is a good place for us to start headed towards the end of the episode, is our conversation about inclusivity. So,
Oh, yes, I've
right,
forgotten.
yes, and you're the organizer of Women in Logic, right?
That's right. We are celebrating 10 years.
10 years.
Vlogs 20, 10 years.
What's the story of Women in Logic? How did it come about?
That's great. I've been part of the lakes community for many years, as you know, and I think I was the second lakes ever, which was 1986 or something like that. And in 2013, it was the first time that a woman was a chair of lakes. It was Orna Sapardi. And she was giving, it was in New Orleans, I think. And she was giving the numbers and of the conference, business meeting. And I was shocked, by the lack of women. First said, I am the first chair of lakes, a woman chair of lakes. And she gave detailed numbers, and they were terrible. So I said, well, this is too bad. Have to do something about that.
Do you remember how the numbers looked like? Because as we were talking at the beginning here, today is like, what, 5% or less?
I have the numbers in several blog posts, because I also have the blog post called Women in Logic. So I kind of have several times the statistics that I'm based on. And I think I have honest numbers in one of those things. But if you kind of remind me, I'll send you honest numbers because I still kept it.
I'll put it either at the end of the episode or the description.
Sure. I also have the numbers that I actually feel even more strongly about, because this was kind of leaks in 2013. She was just kind of doing a small thing to show to the people that was our community that was what she showed was that our community was much worse than I thought. And but I then found some numbers from the AIUW, the American Association for Women in Universities or something like that, University Women or something like that. And this number showed that actually, when I started in 1985 or thereabouts, the numbers were not that bad. I mean, the numbers were around 30%. And
are you talking about our field, about mathematics, or are you talking about higher education in general?
I was talking about computing, actually.
30% back then, okay.
I think it's computer and mathematics. But I'll show the numbers, kind of proper numbers. And the thing is, at that stage, I was recently finished my undergrad and stuff. And I said, oh, it's because, things take a while. Women only been allowed to do things recently. In Brazil, things were better because, I had lots of female professors, teachers in university. But that's because things there were new, right? Over here in the UK, things were much worse to begin with. And I mean, my friend Renata Wasserman has a picture of the first class in computation, the EMI in USP. And you wouldn't believe it's like 50%. I think it's more women than men. Kind of.
Wow.
In the 1950s.
Wow. Yeah, Brazil is always ahead. Yes.
Brazil punches above its weight on this business. Seriously. But the numbers, instead of improving like I was expecting, because I thought, 30, we're going to get to 50 soon. It's just a question of kind of getting more people and talking more girls and stuff. But instead of improving, things went backwards. Things got worse and worse and worse. And one kind of in 2013 was that bad. And I thought it was getting worse in other parts of the world, not in computation. I thought computing is a new thing. It's the other guys that are letting the side down. But no, that was exactly in logic and computer science, because that's what LICS stands for. So I kind of got worried and I said, well, let's start doing things. And I started with a Facebook group. And in 2016, LIX was in New York. And I was just watching and stuff. And Shankar, who was the general chair, said to me, Valeria, is the celebration of 20, it was 2016, so it's 20 years, 30 years, whatever, of LIX. Do you want to say, you've always been around, do you want to say something? And I said, you know what, Shankar, I will, with pleasure. But you might not like what I have to say. So I kind of gave an impromptu talk, which I still have the slides from in 2016 in New York, saying how bad the situation was. And I got lots of, sorry about that, I got lots of people liking what I was saying, and lots of people pushing back. Lots of people saying that it was not as bad as I was making it out. And but, I mean, and lots of people pushing forward saying, oh, come on, Valeria, it's not only women. It's non-binary people, it's Black people, it's it's underrepresentativity in general. You know, you have to make this other cases sure. And I said, well, yeah, you're right. Of course it is all of that, you know. It's a terrible state. I mean, there's too many problems of underrepresentativity. You know, there's a problem with young people not being represented when they need to be. There's problem of people from the global south not getting enough saying in things. There's problem. There's all the colorism and this stuff about trying to put people in buckets of, you know, you're Black or you're not Black. You're kind of middle in the way. This terrible. There's all this, all the genders and things that people kind of are not allowed to have, and things were changing in other parts. So kind of, you know, all of these things need talking and need to be done. But I said, but you know, I have kids to raise, jobs to keep, and I was still, I mean, I had a triple job, right? Because I was doing work in boring stuff in the industry, trying to do work on fun stuff on the middle of the night, raising kids and looking after my household and stuff. So I was working like no one's business. So I said, I'm afraid I can only do one thing. So the thing that I decided to do was to create Women in Logic. So in 2017, Reykjavik, we started with the first Women in Logic, and we celebrated Anna Angosdóttir, who's a teacher there still. I think she's almost emerita now, and we kind of have a conference with cake and champagne at the end of the conference. And since then, we kind of just doing kind of a small thing, because I said, I've been doing these conferences about intuitionistic modal logic for years and stuff. So I know I can do this easily. And, you know, I could have carried on doing that easily, but for these things to work, you need to get newer people coming in. So we kind of then moved into a system where we now have 3 chairs, one who is in her second year, one in the middle, and one new one every year. So just to keep continuity with the previous work, but on the other hand, forcing the existence of new people and kind of opening it up. Just at the moment, we're having problems because people are complaining that because the origin was LIX and kind of logic in computer science, that we're not doing enough about logic in philosophical logic or logic in AI or logic in linguistics. Because, you know, as you're asking yourself, kind of logic is in all these things, and they're all connected. And in principle, if we're talking about women in logic, we should be dealing with all of them. But it's hard. It is hard to kind of keep, because the criteria are very different in different places.
And they're also funded by different things. And so LIX
and
LIX is what under
too expensive, right?
LIX is under SIG-log, right? And the other one might not even be a SIG at all, right? The other logic. Anyway.
Well, there are lots of, I mean, the ASL is the Association of Symbolic Logic, kind of tends to be over and above all these things. But,
oh, I see. Gotcha.
But they don't have money, and they don't give you money.
Doesn't help.
There's logic in AI. Springer has always had a proceedings and stuff. So there's lots of meetings there, but nothing kind of single. There's just the triple AI and some AJK and stuff like that. So there are kind of quite a bit of logic there too. But kind of, it's flock that some of these groups connect, not all. The philosophical logicians are still vanished on that.
What is in this 20 years, right? It's going to be 20 years next year. What is the what you guys learn, like about what can we do about it? How can we get better numbers, or like what is going on? What is the outlook?
Yeah, we've learned lots, but it's kind of nothing. There's no silver bullet, right? I actually said to myself when I started the stuff that I was going to do it for 3 years, and if 3 years wasn't it enough, then I was going to stop.
Just like your husband saying, come for 3 months, just 3 years here.
Well, yeah, I think I like threes and sevens, but yeah, I kind of said we're going to do it for 3 years, and I did. I was organizer for 3 years, but then I stayed as a steering committee and stuff. And one of the things that we kind of think that's important is to have lists of women. So we started with women in logic. We also have women in programming language. We have lists so that when people say to you, there are no women around, we can say, no, look, it's on the web. It's in GitHub. You just go there and there's loads of names for you to choose from. And again, to begin with, that was started by more philosophical logician, philosophy of logic person, Catarina Dutra-Novaes, which is another Brazilian, but established in Amsterdam. And so she started with a Google Doc, and I kind of actually paid my daughter to kind of make it into a bigger list with addresses and stuff, like email addresses and stuff. And now it's in GitHub, so kind of people can update themselves and remove themselves if they don't. I mean, they have all to begin with, they had to add themselves. Or they can add a friend if the friend agrees and stuff. We have the website, which at some stage had lots of stories, because you see, 2017 is just after the Me Too movement, so kind of we got a big push up. It was kind of important, and then we got a big thing during the pandemic. Women were kind of fairly desperate, and so kind of I think we had 92 people online for women in logic. For me, in the middle of the night, right, because it was happening in Europe. So I studied. I said, I'm not doing that for leaks or anything like that, but for the women in logic, I stayed up through the night, kind of to do things. But so you know, it is small, and I at least have had lots of people saying to me that they felt that was, I don't know, I never bothered too much about the fact of being the only woman. I've been in a meeting where kind of 80 men and myself, and the guys opened the meeting and said, "Gentlemen, and Valeria." So I'm I'm resilient like that. But lots of other women came to me after the thing, saying that they actually felt that it helped quite a bit in leaks where kind of things can be a bit rough, to kind of have meeting the other women before the meeting or something like that, and kind of seeing lots of people suffering the same sort of issues and problems. Because, the thing is not big things, it's microaggressions all the time.
And it comes back to what we're talking about earlier on, is this feeling of belonging, right? Like if you're in a room where you're kind of like you're different from everyone, then it doesn't feel like you belong there, right? It's not like you draw too much attention. It's very uncomfortable.
I also had this situation with men kind of coming to one meeting of women in logic and feeling kind of different. I mean, or to Grace Hopper. I talked to someone male friend of mine who went to Grace Hopper, and it's like 800 women. Even the sound is different, the sound is different because the voices are much higher, right? The women's voice are high pitch. Yeah. So, it's a very different experience, and people don't realize how difficult it is until they actually be in the situation a little bit.
And what do you think is the reason for being such a disparate number? I mean, there is obvious the incredible structural problem here of
But yeah,
patriarchy, technology, and higher paying jobs are usually done by men. It's a very big problem that it's we're not going to solve it. We're not going to solve the big one. Exactly. Like we can slowly do things to address them, but in our small community here, what do you see are the patterns here? Why women gets pushed away from our community, for example?
Well, you said it all. Why they get pushed away? I think the difficult thing is how you do things to change. And I keep saying that because it's a societal thing, it's very difficult to increase the number of women submitting papers. But as you know, the number of women kind of coming to degrees is not that low. So it's a leaky pipeline. The women kind of come to do the degree. They just don't stay because they find things difficult, or they used to at least. Now I think it's getting worse. Even Rio, apparently there's been years that PUC has had no women in computer science.
Do you think it makes it worse, the fact that as a woman you have to postpone you have plans to have children, for example, and all of a sudden you're starting a PhD and we're talking about finishing your PhD past your 30s and things, clock starts ticking and all of that. Like you think that's also a problem?
Yeah, it is kind of there are kind of societal kind of constraints, right? And the business of CNPq not giving you, people not giving you time to have your kid, or kind of
time off, being compensated.
It's not just the time off. I mean, the time off is important, and it's kind of, again, societal thing to kind of make sure that places like the US have a decent maternity leave, which it does.
Especially not as a PhD.
Decent. But people before did not pay attention to that when considering curriculum, right? So you kind of say, oh no, this person's older and has fewer publications than this other one. I mean, I don't know if you've seen this, but there's lots of studies showing that during the pandemic, women suffered quite a bit. Men actually produced more papers because they didn't have to do other jobs and they could just do the research. And women had to do all the other jobs and look at the kids and stuff like that. So I think the difficulty is really finding ways to make sure that things not only look fair but are fair, right? That's the hardest bit, because biological changes we won't affect, right? The women do get less fertile after 33 or 35, whatever kind of, there's some things that we can't change, but there's an awful lot that we could change, and in particular in academia, I think one of the important things is actually force people to think about invited speakers, female invited speakers. I get an awful lot of pushback from people saying that that quotas no, that I insist, kind of you should. It is the place where you can intervene. We can show. I mean, if we can show role models, women doing the stuff and being good at the stuff. I insist on an awful lot of kind of trying to look at history and see things properly, because I don't know if you've noticed, but we all know who invented relativity or evolution, but do you know who kind of discovered that what stars are made of and how they grow and diminish?
No.
It's a woman, in Cecilia Payne something.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, her single name is Payne, but And the thing is, what happens is that things that were done by women become part of the folklore, become part of what everyone knows. It doesn't get us, the names of the women do not get associated. This is changing, right? Now people do know about Rosalind Franklin, even if she hasn't got her Nobel Prize. People do know a little bit about Jane Goodall and stuff like that. There's a few people that, but I don't know lots of those people that actually did things, and I mean, the names don't stick because they're suppressed. I mean, it's not that's the other thing that we'd talked about before, right? It's not that people are trying to be nasty and suppress, wanting to suppress people. It's just they do because
it's part of how they were raised. Exactly, it's part of what is normal, how we learn. Like, it's just natural. So we have
to make an extra effort to kind of remember that these are these people, and that they actually didn't. Yeah, and
do you know who Rupsha Samantha is? She was a professor at Purdue, where I was, and she was denied tenure. And I actually invited her to the podcast, and I was having this conversation with her. And one of the things that she brought up about these ideas of quotas that you're bringing up is that it comes to she was feeling that she was coming to a point where she was being invited to so many things because of like people wanted to seem like they were extremely inclusive, so they invited her for literally everything because there was not that many other women, right? And it came to a point where she was overburdened, right? Because it's kind of also bad to decline all of these things. So this is one issue that I wanted to ask you, like, what do you do about that? Because if you keep inviting so many women, then at some point then also start hurting a little bit too, right? Because instead of them doing the research they should be doing, now they're doing service, which doesn't really pay that much off,
Right. That there's too many problems into this thing, right? There's this business that some people being overburdened, whereas there's loads of other women that are not invited at all. There's this business that some women, like me, kind of don't mind talking more than they should, whereas some others kind of are much more restricted and kind of would only talk if they feel that they know enough about this. That there's the famous stuff about, if a man knows benefit of what is in a job requirement, they will apply and say, "Oh, I'm perfect for that." Whereas if a woman does not know everything that has been described, they will say.
I invited a woman one time, and she literally did her whole PhD thesis about the thing. She is the absolute expert about what I wanted her to speak. She's like, I don't feel very, very comfortable with my knowledge. And I'm like, come on, it's fine.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Didn't.
That's right.
And
it's not one person.
It's also partly because, there's a culture where, if you miss one thing, you get more attacked as a woman than you would get attacked as a man, right?
That's right. That's totally clear. A woman who kind of looks like she knows what she's talking about is not considered assertive. She's considered a bitch, or kind of an overbearing, a bossy pants.
And if you complain, then you're the hysterical one, right? Oh, this is nothing. Like, come on, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's hard. It's not so kind of, but it's no reason to not carry on trying to do the right thing, and and not only about women, but about all the other underrepresented people, right? It is important to think about the fact that $10 for you on me, it's not nothing, but some $10 in Brazil, kind of starts making some difference, right?
Yeah, it's 50 reais, 55 reais.
Right? These other things are also very important, but I kind of do the women thing because I don't have time to do all of the others. I do want to do my Dialectica category. I do want to do my my constructive type theory. I do want to do some
We have to choose our battles,
automated
right?
reasoning.
Exactly. And find what resonates the most and that we feel that we can make the most impact, right? And this is one of the reasons I do this podcast. Is I feel that one of the big reasons I do this podcast is because when I was an undergrad, there wasn't other people here in Brazil doing this, like type theory, doing programming languages and functional programming. I felt alone, and I was lucky enough to have the Type Theory podcast. And I would put it in my car, and I would listen, and I would feel part of the community. So once I got to Purdue, and there was no more Type Theory podcast anymore, I was like, you know what? Maybe I can start myself. And I'm always. It was David Christensen and John Sterling.
Ah, right. So John Stanley was doing that.
They have great episodes. I think they have 10 episodes, 10 amazing episodes. One of them is with Bob Constable. Absolutely magistral episode.
Yeah, Bob Constable is good.
Exactly. So every time that I'm recording or thinking about an episode, I'm thinking about these people, and I've actually been in contact with some of them. Like there are some people in Africa that they started learning some of this stuff, but like they have literally nobody around them. There's people in India, there's people in all over the world that they don't have a department around them, and this is a way of making it a little more inclusive. A system with inclusivity somehow. This is why it's Type Theory for All, right? This is what we were talking about earlier about this is for everyone, right? And making role models out of that. So I think a lot about that, like this is why I started the episode saying that you are a role model for me because you are opening doors. And I see myself as someone who is trying to open doors for other kids like I was in the past, right? So inclusivity is something that I care a lot about, but again, it's a huge problem that we're not gonna solve all of it, right? And the next question I want to ask is, so go ahead then. I can ask in a bit.
Yeah, speaking of the kind of importance of inclusivity, I wanted to ask if you could speak to kind of like the personal impact that things like women-only workshops have had on you, because in the United States, there's kind of a trend against DEI and stuff. It's saying like, oh, well, all our workshops are going to be accessible to everybody. And
I have a little bit of a parenthesis to do there, because I think it comes in a large sense, it comes back to what Valeria was saying as what seems like DI and what, like a lot of people are trying to seem like, like some sort of virtue signaling of many senses. And I see that a lot in many places. People just want to seem like they're trying to be inclusive, but they're not tackling the right problems in the sense of like giving room.
Pedro, at the moment I'm taking virtue signaling. At the moment the situation here is so bad that there is no more DEI in lots of things. All these things are disappearing kind of completely, right? Given the administration. So yeah, kind of. I mean, at the moment I'm even taking virtue signaling as a good thing. I think it's absurd, really, the fact that these things are going backwards so fast here. I think all the conquests of women kind of through the decades, the centuries, kind of are being erased, and it is rather terrible.
So what do you think has been kind of the benefit of those kinds of workshops and things that you've kind of helped organize? What's the impact that's had on women that you've seen, for example? How has that helped? Like, because in a way, like, we need to have stronger.
I've seen people talking to me about it. I mean, people kind of come to me and say, that was wonderful. It helped me a lot. I managed to make me stay here and stuff like that. And as I say, I am kind of very robust and I didn't care very much about some of this stuff. But, some of the girls kind of really do feel that makes a huge difference to be able to talk in a group with only women and stuff like that. We had 2 Oregon programming language schools only with women.
I saw it last year. Was all the speakers were women, right? I was so surprised. Like, wow.
To begin with, yeah, kind of. I mean, the one that in 2023 was completely women and had been invited, but I couldn't make it, and so I said, "Oh my God!" And kind of, this time they invited me again. I said, okay, I'm going, and it's good. And so, they are kind of, and then the people that I meet in these meetings kind of normally say that it makes a huge difference. I worry about it because I don't think it makes a big, I mean, unlike Pedro, who's impressed with his own impact, I'm not impressed with my impact. I don't think it's impacting much. But, it's better to do something for a few people than to do nothing for no one.
I think part of kind of the responsibility of the men in computer science is to say is to remember why it's important to have things like women-only spaces, or to have OPLSS where there's all women speakers. And so things like just to hear stories of women saying, so to hear stories of women who have been impacted by that, who've been like motivated, or just felt like, oh, actually, I don't feel like this environment is so hostile.
Yeah, no, I think that's your job, both of yours, and kind of, moreover, kind of demand from other people, right? For me, the hardest bit is since 2013, whenever I see a conference that has only men speaking, whenever I see a manel, it really annoys me no end. And, I have done all sorts of things like write templates to send to people about complaining about that. I lost friends because I complained about that. Because, I don't think people want to be mean, but they don't. I mean, it's the usual stuff of, if you don't do anything about it, then you are being mean. You are being guilty by association, right? So, not to be guilty, you have to speak against this business of situations where there's no women around, because the women exist. They're there. It's just they're being ignored. They're being suppressed in history. And sometimes they're just being silly themselves, as we're saying, about kind of not wanting to put themselves forward, right? Kind of, I think your job is harder because, the women are suffering it. So they have reasons to kind of go after it. But you guys, you benefit from it, right? Same ways I benefit from having the money to live in California and this and that. So it being privileged is a problem.
You talked also about microaggressions and how, when you were starting out, that there was less of a gender disparity. Do you think that also the microaggressions have increased, and that there's been a difference in mentality that has changed? What was it like before, and what's...
And I don't think the microaggressions have increased. I think they actually stay the same. But I'm sure that I did not know how bad it was. Like, for instance, I don't know if you've seen a film called A Portrait of a Scientist or something like that, done by the MIT women. You see, they were kind of documenting the microaggressions, kind of the size of the labs, the size of the grants, because size of labs is something that you can measure. The number of people that have not been even shortlisted, it's very hard to measure, right? It's very difficult to measure microaggressions. So one of the things that I did in my blog was to actually ask people to send stories as they wish, kind of anonymous or with names, whatever they wish. You should have a look and see how bad things can be. But that's very little. There's much, much more. I think what I'm saying is that I think I have been vaguely lucky that I'm thick-skinned. My husband and my supervisor said that I'm tough as boots, old boots. So kind of sometimes it annoys me, but I just carry on. But lots of people kind of really give up on kind of, I think one of the blog posts is called kind of something like a ton of feathers. each one of their microaggressions is a feather. A ton of feathers is still a ton. And I certainly did not know about half of this stuff. Like in 2018, we had a meeting in Oxford, and it was really problematic because, I mean, we had an open mic and people were supposed to kind of come and talk. And I'm afraid I actually did the wrong thing. I stopped people talking because I wanted to kind of preserve the possibility of having women in logic as an academic meeting, a serious academic meeting. So I did not want to become a place where people came to cry. But that's what the girls were doing. They're coming to cry and talk about, horrible things. Things that I don't want to repeat, but it kind of much more serious than feathers, much heavier than that kind of. And I thought, if we're going to carry on being an academic conference, which we are, and we now get even money from, not much, but money from certain places to pay for these students to come, right? Because it doesn't give you academic kudos to talk in Women in Logic. So, you have, and you still have to be in the place and pay for stuff. So kind of we get money for the girls to do that. And so, we have to have some, we can't be a therapy session or something like that. But there was an awful lot, in this particular time, there was an awful lot of bad blood, kind of real horror stories. And things like this film and some other stuff, you can see that things can be much worse still.
I have some horrible stories next to me where I come from, and I understand what you're talking about, and it's one of the reasons I try to bring these kind of things up. It's because it's
you should kind of write to the blog post, send a message with the stories, anonymized, of course, but do send the stories, because I think, it's important to have all levels of stories. I kind of did not have the most horrible ones. I mean, I think we had something like 3 cases of rape in this case. Real rape, not
yeah
rape that requires surgery after. So kind of, yeah.
What can we do as men to help alleviate the problem?
Well, I think that's what we have to do, is make sure that there's always women around, and kind of, and where we can, right? We can't force people to submit papers, but you can force organizers to have women present as invited speakers. You can stop when people kind of making jokes and saying, "Oh, this such and such is being hysterical." You can make sure that there's environment is good, that there is no locked room jokes around and stuff like that. You can walk people back to hotels from receptions and stuff like that. Kind of, you can talk to people who are kind of completely alone in the middle of receptions, where kind of, because you have to go to receptions and you have to talk to people in conference, right? So it's very sensible to kind of, okay, you have to do your own talking to important people and stuff like that, but you can always talk to someone who's alone in first conference and stuff like that. It's good. So there's plenty to do, and again, mostly it's minor, right? Stuff that I do is very minor, but it's better than not doing anything.
Yep, for sure. Thank you, Valeria. I think this is a great place for us to end our conversation. Very important conversation, heavy, tough conversation, but important stuff. And I just want to end in a note saying that
A happier note. Yeah.
no, I mean, I just want to say that if you're unsure if academia, if this is for you, it is for you. It is for you. It should be for everyone. It should be for all of us, you know. For some of us,
Yeah.
it's going to be harder. For some of us, it's going to take more effort. It's going to take more, but shouldn't stop us from chasing our dreams, chasing what we believe in, you know. And you just have to find the right people to surround you with. And Valeria is one of these people. I hope I can be one of these people as well, you know, like here at Type Theory Forall. And there are good people around, and we eventually things will come to an end.
Absolutely. We get there. Thank you so much for having me. It's lovely. And I hope you can catch lots of this stuff.
No, I like leaving behind all the details. I'll cut particular things that shouldn't be in, but in general, it was an amazing conversation. Thank you so much for being here. Thanks, Dan.
Great fun talking to you guys.
I should always mention that every time that Dan is here, at least 70% of the questions are his, because he is the mastermind behind driving the whole thing. Thank you so much, Dan. And is there any last things we should? Sorry, you were gonna say something, Dan? You gotta defend yourself. Is there any last things that you would like to bring up for us to wrap up, Valeria, that we didn't talk, or you wanted to mention?
No, I think we talked an awful lot. It was good.
Thank you so much for being here. It was a great pleasure talking to you.
And thank you for sharing so much of your time. I think it means a lot.
I hope you guys enjoyed this episode as much as I did. I met Valeria at Kikam here in Brasilia, and it was I was extremely surprised by how kind she was and how nice she was to me. And I was surprised that she actually already knew about my podcast, and she's a friend with Cody Rue. So it was very nice, and I invited her. This was, I think, I forgot when this was. I think it was October, and then we started making plans to make this happen over email, and we found a date to make it on late November, early December, and I'm releasing this show mid-January now. So yeah. It was a very, very nice person to meet, and a very nice conversation to have here in the show. I feel very glad that this happened. And I think you guys could feel with me how much she cares about equality in academia, about the problems that that happens to women, you know, just for being women, and how things are extra hard for them. And I think not only in this field particularly, but academia at large, right? And it's tough to talk about some of these things because I have experience with it. I've seen some really, really huge shit happening with very close friends. So I don't know, man. I don't know. Academia is fucking fucked up. One of my overarching goals is that hopefully there's, I don't know, just trying to make it a little bit, very little bit better. Maybe by, you know, talking about these things, we can draw attention to these things and show that this is not okay. That we all should strive for making this a better place to work, to live, And yes, in academia, we're doing science, we're pushing forward the frontiers, the boundaries of knowledge. But in the end of the day, we're still all people, right? And this is a social endeavor where we have to deal with people, talk with people, share our ideas with people. So in the end of the day, it's all about the people, right? And we need a good environment to work. We need a good environment to flourish. We need a good environment to make stuff happen. So yeah, this is a call for having a little bit of more empathy in academia. I hope you guys like this episode. If you guys have any questions or comments, send them on contact@typetheoryforall.com. I always read these emails. The rest of this month, the month of January, I will be in a meditation retreat. I might be able to, maybe I can talk a little more about that in Type Theory Exists. I'm not talking more about that here. But it's cool. It's part of my life. What else? Okay, yeah, send emails, become patrons, send money, because I'm basically unemployed. Well, there's this podcast, but it doesn't really make money. I'm losing money with this. Yeah. Huge shout out again to the patrons, which is making this financially viable. And at least I'm not going, at least it's able to support itself now with the help of people. So thank you a lot. And I think that's it. I talked too much. See you guys next time.